Alright guys, good stuff! Londononion here again with another class review and guide for Defiance 2050. And in this review we're going to be discussing the Assault class. And as I always say, there are multiple ways to use a given class, and consequently anything I say is debatable and to be taken with 2 grains of salt. Our main focus will be on the class skills and how the combination of skills can best benefit the user and their weapon loadout. Alright, so the Assault class is the absolute bread and butter of all the Arc Hunter classes. The most basic all-rounder, run-and-gun type that is competent but not particularly masterful in any respect. The Assault class is your super soldier with augmented tools. Agile, strong, dangerous up close, and always having an answer to any circumstance. Because of how broadly applicable this description is, I'm just going to relate the Assault class to the Winter Soldier. So as tradition would suggest, the Assault class has 2 polarized playstyles. However, the polarization is not as pronounced as our other classes. Regardless, I will coin these 2 as the Raider and the Maverick. Raiders essentially want nothing more than fast, close-quarter engagements and high damage. Mavericks have a more conservative approach and have a more balanced orientation to offense, self-preservation, and independence. Technically, no class is locked into any particular loadout, but for the purpose of consistency, the class build will be constructed with the assumed loadout of assault rifles, SMGs, and shotguns. As an assault class, high frequency and close-range fighting will make up a significant portion of one's experiences regardless of playstyle. Now, onto our first skill. We have the Sprint, which increases one's movement by 75% for a maximum of 10 seconds. This is a versatile skill that can have a series of uses. One can use this skill to storm their enemies or close the distance. Alternatively, one could use it for evasive purposes, whether it be for cover, dodging, or just simply getting out of range. Otherwise, it could simply be used for an ammo run or getting to an incapacitated ally. The uses are really all over the place. As an additional plus, upon 3 synergy levels achieved, the Sprint becomes Focused Sprint, which provides an additional buff to one's accuracy while Sprint is active. Sprint also comes with a mere 20 seconds for cooldown. So our first tier of skills consists of Quick Reload, Recharge, and Amped. Quick Reload, as you can guess, creates a buff that amplifies one's reload speed by a maximum of 45%. This perk, however, is only in effect while sprinting. For those that can put 2 and 2 together, this perk is more fitting for an aggressive or raider type player. When running and gunning, having a faster reload speed is necessary for maintaining offense, especially in the face of numerous consecutive targets. Recharge grants a maximum decrease in ability recharge time by a maximum of 18% upon achieving a kill, and has a very minor cooldown of 5 seconds. After synergies, however, the buff can be increased beyond max levels. Amped increases the recharge rate of one's self-revive by a maximum of 30%. As a close quarters combat fighter, one has a similar risk to the Crusader of going down and may need all the buffs they can to keep themselves on their feet. Those who take more of a Maverick playstyle would likely maximize the Amped perk, as it is a skill meant for self-preservation. Now, if you've been following my past reviews, you already know that I am more of a Maverick type, as I'd rather ensure survival than amplify my damage output. However, those that prefer a hybrid approach, of course, are best maximizing Recharge, as this plays into the Sprint skill, among others, and as we previously discussed, is a versatile skill. Our first junction of skills are Super Melee and Healing Stim. Super Melee, upon activation, grants a damage buff increasing one's melee damage by a maximum of 600%. This skill lasts 5 seconds and has a short cooldown of 15 seconds. Those in the Raiders gang would probably love this skill. It is essentially an instant kill when used against weak enemies, and a good amount of tough enemies would either die with some moderate damage previously taken, or have a considerable amount of health depleted. Healing Stim fully regenerates one's health and shields and has a short cooldown of 20 seconds. There really is not much else to be said about this skill other than it being the safe option. Raiders would benefit most from Super Melee, however they do have the option of using the Healing Stim. Raiders are likely to sustain a significant amount of damage, and it would be logical to have a means of faster regeneration to sustain their own onslaught. Mavericks, on the other hand, would prefer Healing Stim to maximize their survival rate. As a Maverick, I prefer Healing Stim. Plus, I find that using melee against moderate to tough enemies to be unnecessarily risky and requires a fair amount of discretion. As a Maverick, Healing Stim makes the most sense. Raiders can consider this skill, however. Our next tier of perks are Assault Dampen, Shotgun Focus, and Grenade Accelerate. Assault Dampen increases accuracy of assault rifles and SMGs by a maximum of 45%. I can see this being useful for SMGs as their accuracy is pretty bad, let's say. Shotgun Focus increases the effective range of their shotguns up to a maximum of an additional 40%. And Grenade Accelerate reduces grenade cooldowns by 40%. This tier is where the polarization takes a bit of a break. One can argue that shotguns are more of a raider tool, while assault rifles and SMGs would be more fitting for a balanced combatant. But whether one has a more conservative or aggressive style of play, both weapons already have modifications to aid with the explained aspects. Plus, it is not impossible to be aggressive with an assault rifle, while reserving a shotgun as a backup. Personally, I am most impressed with throwing grenades almost twice as fast as I'm used to, not to mention there are no modifications that can affect this tool. So personally, I go with Grenade Accelerate. Our final tier consists of Dodge, Rolling Reload, and Scavenge. Dodge provides a 9% maximum reduction in the probability of receiving damage from a far enough distance. Unfortunately, there are no specified meter ranges for when this perk takes effect, not to mention that a 9% reduction barely feels like it's worth the investment. Rolling Reload, upon performing a roll, reloads a maximum of 45% of one's magazine. This is the perfect answer to enemy onslaught, especially if one is not too far off from an automatic reload. Unfortunately, this perk does not seem to work on every weapon. I've only experimented with shotguns, SMGs, and assault rifles, and shotguns seem to be unaffected by this perk. Scavenge, upon a successful kill, grants a maximum of 40% of one's reserve ammo and has a rather minor cooldown of 10 seconds. In the span of 20 seconds in constant combat, one can essentially replenish all of their ammo. Now, I find the last two skills interesting, and this is where the polarization in playstyles can be observed. Raiders would likely prefer Rolling Reload to minimize the recesses in their fire and ensure they have an answer when dodging an attack. Mavericks can use Dodge as an option, but would benefit most from Scavenge to ensure their weapons can always be fired. Personally, regardless of playstyle, having to reload is not that big of a deal, and there seems to be very few circumstances where a reload is the reason one becomes incapacitated. As a Maverick type, however, I may be biased towards Scavenge. Now, one can attempt to split the skills, as both are pretty good in this onion's opinion, but the numbers before maximization are barely worth it. Our final junction has Close Combat and Concussion Blast. Close Combat buffs one's damage output at close range by a maximum of 50% for 10 seconds. This one goes without explanation. The skill begs to be used by raiders for an extra offensive edge while running and gunning. Unfortunately though, this skill cannot be stacked with super melee. The skill comes with a moderate cooldown of 40 seconds, but if a raider started off their skill tree with the hybrid recharge perk, then the skill can be frequently activated. Concussion Blast upon activation allows one to stun all nearby enemies for 6 seconds and comes with a very short cooldown of 15 seconds. This can be an option for raiders in the event they are in way over their heads. Mavericks, however, would likely invest in this skill. One can use this skill for evasion or having a leg up in offense. However they choose to use it, the survival of the user is the main purpose of this skill. And those are the main assault builds. Now, if I was speaking pure gibberish in this review, here's a summarization. There seems to be two main playstyles with the assault skill tree, and I coin these as the Raider and the Maverick. Raiders are oriented toward pure offense and high damage output, while Mavericks are oriented to self-preservation and balanced tactics. For Raiders, their skills are Quick Reload or Recharge, Super Melee, Grenade Accelerate, Rolling Reload over Scavenge, and Close Combat over Concussion Blast. For Mavericks, their skills are Amped over Recharge, Healing Stim, Grenade Accelerate, Scavenge, and Concussion Blast over Close Combat. So, moving into this awesome Onion's opinion, despite what I thought the Assault class was going to be, painfully basic, the class is surprisingly effective. I always like when there is more than one way to use a class, especially when the variations are effective. Despite being on the basic side, relatively speaking, which is not a criticism, the class still finds its niche as a distinctive part of the Arcfall gang. It almost reminds me of the Engineer, but in a slightly different way. The Engineer takes a page from everyone's book and is consequently prepared for anything. The Assault class, however, covers all of their bases with all the necessary advantages they need to be ready for anything. I only have one very tiny nitpick with this class, and that is with the rolling reload being ineffective on shotguns. In a way, I can understand why this may be the case, as shotguns have so few rounds that low percentages essentially have no effect. Otherwise, though, the Assault is a solid pass in this Onion's book. So, that concludes the review. Thank you oh so much for watching, and you can continue on with your life.